This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hello, Place to Be Nation. JT here, and early this morning some news broke, unfortunately, the passing of a wrestling legend, Vader, passed away at the age of 63. Of course, had well-known issues with his heart, had heart failure, and I think it was even a point like 2 years ago he was given months to live, and he persevered, and unfortunately was battling pneumonia over the past month, and that finally took him down. His son tweeted out earlier today. So, of course, to honor the big man, we're going to do some content here at PlayStation.com, and one of those things is a quick PodBlast here tonight with a gentleman that knew him fairly well, because he worked in the WWF at the same time that Vader was there, and that is, of course, my friend and yours, former host of the Kevin Kelly Show right here at PlayStation.com, currently the American play-by-play voice of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Is that your official title, Kevin Kelly?
English commentary. English commentary.
That's right, English. That makes more sense. So, how are you?
I'm good, man. Yeah, we should get together over better circumstances, but
like the Christmas play.
I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad we are together, and yeah, we'll share some memories about a really cool, interesting guy who lived a lot of lives, if you think about it, and was 63 at the time of his passing. To be fair, I thought he was older, only because he played in the Super Bowl in 1979.
Yes, that is true. And so he must have been pretty damn young then, obviously, right?
Yeah, I mean, he came, out of college, was a, offensive lineman drafted by the Rams, and there he is on the gridiron. I think he was a rookie or was in his second year, and then made the transition into wrestling, and he was like, because there was a whole generation of guys, if you remember, that were NFL stars, but the NFL wasn't paying a lot back, let's say in the 60s.
Right.
So a lot of guys crossed over, like Blackjack Mulligan and Ernie Ladd and Wahoo McDaniel and guys like that, because they needed to supplement their income in the off season. So he was one of those last guys that sort of made that real transition, but made it bigger than any of the other guys in the Ernie Holmeses and, things like that, who had made the transition in that late 70s, early 80s time frame.
For sure. So he was forced to retire after a couple of seasons, ruptured patella, and then started working out, of course, in a gym, was spotted by, actually, it doesn't say who he was spotted by, but I know he ended up in the AWA, traded by Brad Ringens, and that's pretty much where he got his start. He was the baby bull, Leon White's, he had some decent run there. Then went overseas, worked in Europe for a while, then to New Japan, then eventually to WCW, where he really kind of took off on the American soil anyway. He, of course, had success in Japan. But that American run is what he's probably most revered and known for by most fans, where, of course, he had the great series with Sting, was a world champion, was oscillating back and forth with Japan as well, had some continued good work over there. And then his WWF run, which by many is seen to be a bit of a disappointment, I think just based on potential. He's got a good first year and then kind of downhill from there. And Kevin, when you were used to come on with me and Scott on the Place to Be podcast way back in the day, before we were best friends, just acquaintances, you talked a lot about, Vader's, we had talked a lot about kind of Vader's arrival and kind of what went wrong and where it went wrong. And we talked about that with James Dixon as well, author of the Titan Sinking series, just kind of how he was injured and kind of got off to a rocky start, found his footing, and then just kind of went off the rails from there. So you would have first came across him in what, late 96?
In the summer of 96, when I started, the first TV taping that I was at, they did it was Raw, and it was the day after King of the Ring. And he was in the advertised dark match for the Raw taping at the Broome County Arena in Green Bay. So that was actually the first time that I saw, and I hadn't run into him the whole day, and I had been offering the handshake to everybody, because that's what you do. And he's dressed and ready to, at Gorilla, and he's got a couple of minutes before he's going out, and he looks at his hand and he shakes my hand. He goes, "Well, you've just been gloved by Vader," and apparently his gloves were, a little ripe from water and being in the gym bag. And I was like, it's okay. but he was always really cool and laid back. Guys that got to work with him on the road saw much more of his personality and got to know him better than I did. Mm-hmm. I would simply see him at TVs, and there were always there was a lot of ribbing going on with the boys, you know what I mean? So ribs that would start over that weekend run of shows would then continue on to to Monday TV, Tuesday TV. So I was always kind of catching up with what's going on, and they were usually trying to give, poor Leon a hard time about something, but whatever, he didn't, he would play along with it and all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of, and everything from football stuff and rivalries of sports teams to his run in Japan, to getting beaten up allegedly by Paul Orndorff at WCW, whatever they could do.
Right.
But he was cool, man, and he was just he enjoyed, having a glass of wine and relaxing after a show, and was never anything but nice to me and the crew, and was just this big, massive guy. He got in trouble in Kuwait, which was
yes.
a huge thing. Right after I started, he's over there doing press for the Kuwaiti tour, and he slaps an announcer, and he's going to get this huge international incident, and all the stuff with Shawn at SummerSlam. So he was kind of front and center of the news when I got there. And
I'll never forget the Vader detained graphics, what they would, because they played it up as a storyline, right? I mean, so it's they show with the bars dropping down over his face, sitting on the couch and everything. Was there real fear that he may not make it back?
Yes, there was sort of that double-edged sword type of thing. It's we want you to get out, but if you get out, you're going to be in trouble. So right. We hope you get out, and we hope we don't get in trouble as a company. But it was more on him. It really wasn't the company. Mm-hmm. You'll never be able to come back to Kuwait and wrestle on, have shows in Kuwait. It was more on him. He could have been looking at years in jail, or, some, extreme form of punishment for what it was because of the country and the laws and things like that. Because I remember, and I can't pinpoint what it was exactly, but because it happened on television on a news program,
right?
Even though they might show the footage from a war or some bombing or some accident or something like that, but because it happened on television, it was this other level of trouble. It was crazy. But yeah, man, Leon found himself in some hot water over that deal, no doubt. He also got, and this isn't talked about a lot, I know Chris Charlton wrote about it in his Lions Pride book. He comes in 87 to mm-hmm. New Japan, right? And Inoki had the idea for the Vader character for a couple of years. And it would have happened sooner, except Masa Saito, who knew Brad Rangans and knew Vader through him. Saito goes to jail, right? He gets out of jail, and then he couldn't find Vader, couldn't find Leon to play the role. They eventually reconnect, and then they put it together in 87. But the idea had been on the drawing board for a couple of years.
Right.
So then he goes over in 87, and they finally debut him on the Ryogoku show, Sumo Hall, at the end of the year. And the show was kind of a mess, and everybody's pissed drunk because it's an end-of-the-year type of thing in the crowd. And this is when they still had the comfy cushions out at Sumo Hall. So Vader comes out in this mess of a main event against Inoki and beats him in 5 minutes, and then the people start to get hot, and they, it's kind of a riot that sort of breaks out, and they're lighting the cushions and throwing them at the ring, and New Japan got banned from the building for 2 years. So he's been in hot water several times in his life, you know what I mean? This is heat, and it's not good heat. And it wasn't his fault, it wasn't his doing, but he was in the right place at the wrong time. But the character was tremendous, and everybody always wanted that helmet. Why can't we have the helmet? Bring the helmet to WWF. That's what we want.
Right,
Just bring that.
I don't think he ever had it at all, right? He never wore it?
Supposedly it didn't work anymore. It was all broken up or something. I don't know. But why the frick didn't the company just spend because they didn't have a couple of bucks.
I'll say they were dead broke when he was there, right?
Yeah. And, repurpose the thing somehow and get it back to life, because that was badass when he had that. And then matches with Sting and WCW, like you mentioned, they were tremendous. Harley race out the corner, and my God, Sting took an ass whipping.
Especially the first one at the Great American Bash. I mean, that was just a beatdown, like a legendary beatdown. It was great. I mean, for him to put Vader over that way and really build him up as a monster heel. But yeah, go ahead, your buddy.
Well, yeah, I got a couple of buddies in Florida that did extra work for WCW, and they had a couple of Vader stories. Like, Vader laid it in, let's just say. And, the extras, the enhancement guys on TV were like, please don't say Vader. Please don't say Vader. You got Vader. Shit.
Well, I mean, he really broke the back of a jobber, right? I mean, Joe Thurman paralyzed him for a few hours and broke his back.
Yeah, just a few hours. It's okay, right?
I guess if you're going to be paralyzed, a few hours isn't the worst thing in the world, right? I mean, you'll take that, right. Compared to the other options. But and then, of course, he really fucked up Mick Foley as well a couple of times I guess the ear wasn't really his fault as much. But
well, yeah, the ear was not his fault.
Right.
But
the powerbomb on the floor was rough.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, it's rough. It's all rough stuff. And that style, that crash boom bang style, and that real hard hitting New Japan style took it out of him, and he just didn't have it when he came over. And he comes back over, and then he does those matches in '94, and he's still traveling back and forth, and he's UWF, he's doing these other companies as well, and he's by the time he gets to 1996, man, he's worn out.
Yeah.
So it was, and I know like the monsoon thing, that was a huge deal. That hadn't happened.
Well, and then he was hurt. I think he does the monsoon thing, but he had already had like a shoulder injury, and then he ends up telling Vince. And I think from what I remember from the Titans sinking series, like that was kind of Vince was like not thrilled that he had hit it or whatever. So then he ended up being out until Mania. So that really killed like his early momentum that he was, he came in hot with the gorilla stuff and then got cooled way down. One other thing I want to mention was WCW run that I love is those matches with the Boss, Ray Traylor in '94.
Oh, sure.
Oh, those are some just if you want to see hard hitting brawls, just Haas's slobber knocker, like that is, if that's up your alley, that is a series to watch because they just beat the shit out of each other.
We're a big fan of that stuff. We love it.
Yeah. So do you feel like he had more potential? Or, I mean, you're kind of saying he was worn down in '96. Do you feel like they maxed out what they could have with him, or do you think there was more there?
Well, I think if the company was built in a different way, and it was not built for look at the guys that they tried to bring in that time, and the company was at a real crossroads. What are we? Are we a wrestling company or are we a sports entertainment company? Because every time they tried to bring in serious wrestler guy from Vader and Dan Severn and things like that, it just didn't work out. It sounded great. Mm-hmm. It looked good on paper, but it just was never executed as good as it could have been. And I always think there was that push and pull from the TV side because they would look at somebody like Vader and go, ugh, what is he? Yucky, right. Gross. And no, you don't get it, man. He's awesome. He's a monster and we have to treat him as such. Well, we've got weekly TV, and it's kind of tough when you have weekly TV to have a monster and to have an attraction and to have somebody that's special and build them up for big matches and pay-per-views and, all the stuff with Shawn, all that nonsense and shenanigans at SummerSlam in '96. It's like nobody did him he didn't do any favors. But that said, for the time he got in the business and for what he was able to achieve, I think he far outkicked his coverage. I think he did a great job.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, his legacy is huge. Based on his work in Japan and WCW. WF was just kind of icing on the cake at that point.
Yeah.
Anything you get out of him is a positive. Was he supposed to win the title? I mean, that's always been the rumor, and then it ended up getting changed to Sid. Of course, there's a couple of tip-offs. One is the "It's Time" moniker for that December show, and the stories that J.J. Dillon left, so they changed the plan. Like, is any of that true at that point?
It could all be. I was such a new guy right then and there that I was not in the loop on anything. I probably if we asked Cornette, he would tell us, he would have his version of it. But yeah, I think that originally he was, Vader was supposed to be up, and then somehow, some way it got changed. And certainly, when did JJ's departure was the month before, so that might have ixnayed things. But then it became Bruce, and then it became Jim Ross. Mm-hmm. So it really wasn't that big of a change. I think more, if I had to put money on one, I would say it was probably Shawn going and politicking, some other, because Shawn always had, I know I talked to you guys about this, Shawn had this mystical spell over Vince. We don't know what it was. But like Vince would be adamant, no, it's got to be this way. And then Shawn would come in and have a temper tantrum and throw a fit. And then somehow those, dreamy eyes of his and Vince would melt and change his mind and see it Shawn's way. So that's probably what happened. That it was, I don't feel like losing.
Right. Yeah, so he puts over Sid instead. I think one of Vader's best WWF moments is the Final Four match, of course, where he's just like, that was like a throwback match for him where he comes out and just, bloody Vader was the cover of the Raw magazine. Remember just the gushed eye through the mask and everything. So I think that's probably his best match. His best singles match. He had some good stuff with The Undertaker as well over the summer.
He had the JBL.
Mm-hmm.
That was good. I would think he was still Bradshaw back then. Was that an APA Bradshaw type?
I think it was pre-APA. It was just when he was just like Cowboy Bradshaw.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, those were kind of like big hoss matches that people salivated over, loved, and things like that. But you go back and you look. I saw something. There's 25 Vader matches on New Japan World, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a play. Oh, Vader was in Japan. I've seen pictures. I've heard about it.
Right.
Just go to New Japan World and find him out, or look on Daily Motion. You'll find him. Really, really like cool stuff. And you'll see that, he was like, he got that whoa reaction from everything when they weren't throwing burning, seat cushions at him.
That's right. He, the Kane feud is pretty infamous for him too. Of course, there's one after the loss where he says, "I'm just a big fat piece of shit." That's pretty well known. Was that was he really feeling that way? Like, what the hell was up with that? Do you remember?
It probably was a suggestion from Vince Russo, right? Like, I have a feeling that that's what happened. I'm not sure. But maybe Leon took it a little too literally.
Right, yeah.
Like, you roll out of the ring, bro, and you cut the promo, I'm a big fat piece of shit, and I feel like a loser, and whatever. And that's maybe what was intended the theme of it to be, but perhaps not the verbiage.
Right.
But I wasn't in that meeting when that was passed down, but I do remember us all sitting there watching it going, what did he just say? What the hell? Well, this is pay-per-view. I guess we could curse now, right?
Right, yeah.
All bets are off. Oh.
And then I think one of my other favorite moments of his in the WWF is the Vader bomb with Luna on his back. And the feud with Goldust is entertaining. And that's a really memorable moment at the Rumble that year.
There were always the ideas of those visual moments, but again, there is a move that others had done previously and have done since then, but in the industry, it's called the Vader bomb.
Right. Exactly.
That's what everybody calls it. So that's kind of cool. The Cactus Jack elbow, the Stinger splash, the Vader bomb. That's kind of, the sharpshooter. That's pretty cool.
Slop drop.
No one calls it the slop drop. Come on. They call it the pedigree.
Yeah.
There's moves that are just go hand in hand with the person who was most known for doing them. So that Vader bomb, anytime you could do that, whether it was on Monsoon or on Goldust with Luna on his back, whatever, it's always going to be a very good visual.
And then, he hung around for a while. He had matches across the Indies. He had a little run in TNA, All Japan, Noah. He popped up in WWE a couple times. The most famous one was 2005 when he fell down, trying to get out of the ring. In the feud with Batista. And then most recently was probably his, the whole issue he had with Will Ospreay, if you remember,
right.
a couple of years ago. And he won that match. And people were kind of upset at the time, but I'd say that's probably his most most recent famous moment, right?
One of them. I mean, he tweeted a picture that he probably would regret,
Yes.
But anyway,
that too.
This is one of those things like when you pass away, like when I die, I don't want anybody to be sad. I want everybody to tell horrible stories about me, and I want you to host kind of the roast of it. You know what I mean?
I'm on it. I'm going to start making jokes now. I'll start writing them down now.
Even if it's just, I mean, I don't care. It could all be made up stuff, but whatever, I'm dead. But yeah, that's the thing. And I think with the Ospreay deal, it started from a real place.
Right.
It started with the critique of Ospreay versus Ricochet, and then it sort of morphed into, why don't you come over here and say that to my face? Well, why don't you book it? And then it got booked, and now it's like, oh no, now I've got to wrestle Vader.
Right.
And it was what it was.
Yeah.
But there you go. And my buddy Brutal Bob, who was a guest on the Kevin Kelly show, he wrestled in a 6-man with Vader and Gangrel like a year and a half or so ago. And it was interesting. So, Vader was doing his thing, and I don't think he was aware of who was on his team. And he was mad at the people, but they were the good guys. So it was just an odd set of circumstances. But then all at the end, all was forgiven, and they raised each other's hands, and the crowd cheered, and he went on his way. And that was it.
Interesting guy. I'm sure he'll be in the Dirty Hall of Fame this upcoming year, and that's my prediction.
Wasn't he deserving of it beforehand?
Oh, absolutely. But now they'll definitely act on it.
Yeah, because he's dead.
Yeah. I don't know what they were waiting for. I don't know why they didn't put him in. I guess, I don't know. This year would have been the year, because, he did talk about how sick he was, so there was a chance he wasn't going to make it. All right, so before we wrap up, just what is his legacy to you in the wrestling business? One of the greatest big men of all time, obviously. If you're doing a WCW top 100, he's probably inside the top 5 to 10. And I just overall, between Japan, WCW, WWF, just, a guy that's pretty well revered. And you don't see many people say, I can't stand, or I don't like watching Vader matches, or I don't like watching Vader wrestle. Like, pretty much everyone who's been, lived or revisited that era is a fan of Vader's work on one level or another.
Yeah, I think he's, again, being 400 pounds, not a lot of guys that size, and not a lot of guys that size that could move the way he moved. And I think of that very cool, steam, emitting helmet that he wore in New Japan. And, the images of Inoki across the ring from him, and just the look of awe in the fans' eyes, and those matches that he had over there in Japan. Then the matches in WCW, which was that bridge between from the WCW era, when it began under Turner control until the NWO in 96. Mm-hmm. It was basically void of anything good, other than a couple of, peaks, but it was mostly valley. But a lot of those peaks were built around Vader and Sting.
Yeah.
So before Hogan got there, and, to give Sting somebody to work with, those matches were incredible. Incredible. And then, what could have been in WWF was what it was. But the company was at a time where not a lot of guys were drawing, and the business was still sort of on its rear end, and the company wasn't built to get somebody like him over at that point, because they weren't committed to that style, and they weren't committed to that direction. But yeah, those are sort of his moments. But from New Japan to WCW to WWF, to the Vader bomb being his signature move, a tremendous legacy. The mask that really wasn't a mask. How about that match where his eyeball popped out? Did you ever see that one?
Yeah, that one too, yep.
With Stan Hansen?
Yes.
That was at the Tokyo Dome.
He's got so many memorable moments, and most of them are just due to brutality. Like that's,
yeah.
I don't know if anyone's got more like brutality in-ring based like memorable moments than Vader. He's up there pretty high. And then of course he's got the stuff with Ric Flair as well, the retirement match at Starrcade 93, which is a great feud and match. And then even the Hogan matches aren't bad. Like Vader works his ass off to try and get Hogan over in those. Hogan just sandbagged him, but he's in that as well. So tons of memorable moments for Vader. Any really funny road stories before we go? Anything you can share?
I noticed one time that he had, because he had a very odd gait as he walked, right? And he's taken off his boot one time, and he's repositioning something like in his boot. And I noticed that he had it looked like an orthotic or something in there, on his heel. And then he's like, I said, oh, you have is your heel bothering you? And he says, yeah, I've had these and I just keep adding to them. I go, what? And he took them out, and no lie, there were like 6 of them sandwiched together in his boot. Like, his foot was so bad that he had this stack of things, and it looked like lifts, but they really weren't lifts. They were there for support. And I was like, what are you doing? And like, nothing helps, man. Tell anybody. They'll all think I'm trying to be taller. So that was it, you know, and he was always cool with me. We never had a much more than a hello and goodbye relationship and a how are you and what's going on. And that's it, you know, but that was like one thing that I always kind of don't tell anybody that think I'm trying to be taller.
Well, Kevin, I want to thank you for taking, 20 minutes or so here tonight to chat with me about Vader. I miss you. I love you. Anything you want to plug New Japan related while you're here?
Oh, I sure do, because we're doing the whole G1 Climax tournament we're going to have English commentary for the entire thing.
Nice.
All 19 shows over the course of 28 days. I'll be there live in Japan the whole month, from the middle of July until the middle of August, and from the start of the tournament in Tokyo, as we weave our way through the country all the way back to the final 3 nights in Budokan. And August 12th, we'll find out who wins the G1 Climax this year. So njpwworld.com if you want to subscribe. The best 999 yen a month you could ever spend.
There you go. We'll be having some coverage of that on PlayStation.com as well, in both audio and written form. So sure to check all that out, and check out all the other shows we have at PlayStation.com across our 3 feeds. And with that, we're going to bid farewell to Kevin. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. And we got something percolating with you, sir. Hey, the Seinfeld thing started back up, so check that out. You're always a fan.
Very excited.
That, so. All right, we're out. Good night, Kevin. Good night, everyone. Rest in peace, Vader. A legendary wrestler, of course. You will be missed. And continue to check out all the content around both social media and podcasts. I'm sure there'll be plenty of coverage talking about the movies. So until next time, everyone, take care. It's Vader.